It's a very good question. It's a hard question to answer, I think. I think anyway, that we're currently living with two different accounts of what development might be. On the one hand, we have the idea of development as a kind of major transformation in society, in the economy, and in politics, with all that entails: industrialization, urbanization, changing social structures, changing patterns of production and consumption. Something along the lines of a classic transition to the modern world, and something also like China perhaps is undertaking at the moment. So that's one model. The other model, I think, is one perhaps embodied in something like the Millennium Development Goals, which is much more about alleviating people's suffering, their material deprivations. So this would be things like worries about maternal health, or infant mortality rates, or life expectancy, or access to clean water, access to primary education, and so on. And the trouble is that these two things are sometimes, they're not necessarily compatible. On the one hand, as we know with China, these kinds of major transformations can have quite serious human consequences. On the other hand, dealing with maternal death rates or dealing with infant mortality doesn't necessarily lead to something like sustained structural transformation in the bigger sense. So I think we kind of have these two kind of ways of thinking about development, which aren't necessarily entirely compatible. What I'm trying to do is to think generally about how, over the last 50 or 60 years, we've thought about development, how we've gone about trying to study it. And I suppose what I want to say is that there are kind of at least three tensions, if you like, in how we've thought about development. The first is a tension between general theories of development, which apply to developing countries or very large numbers of them, on the one side, and on the other side, our knowledge of particular countries at particular times, their particular successes and failures. And of course, these two things, general theories and general policies that derive from them, and then our knowledge of particulars, are in a sort of tension. They're also not necessarily entirely compatible. The more we know about specifics, the less plausible our general models seem. So that's one. The second is a kind of a tension, if you like, that goes back to what I was talking about, these models of development. What is it that we're interested in knowing about? Do we want to know about how you reduce maternal death rates? Do we want to know about how you reduce incidences of infectious diseases? Or do we want to know how you get development in this much larger sense of the word? And again, I think there's this kind of tension, if you like, between these two ways of thinking about what it is that we should be studying. And the third tension, which I suppose is implicit in some of those other ones, is about the contribution of different disciplines to how we think about development. Classically, economics has been, as it were, the most influential, the kind of master discipline, if you like. But we also know that politics is very important. We know that anthropology can tell us interesting things about social structures at local levels or whatever it may be. But also we know, as somebody was just reminding me, that natural scientists and technicians of various kinds, and people who build sewage systems, people who build wells, people who worry about buildings or whatever it may be, also have lots to contribute. And in a way, this is what you would expect. Development is a kind of multidisciplinary thing. But on the other hand, these disciplines sometimes find it very hard to talk to each other, so that economists have a particular way of thinking about the world is not necessarily compatible with the way, say, an anthropologist would think about the world. And finding some common ground where these disciplines can learn creatively from others is actually quite difficult. And I think now is exactly a good time to be reflecting on what we've done so far, where we've got to, if you like, in international development. Partly because a lot of things are in a state of flux, a state of uncertainty, post the kind of financial crisis in the West, but also with the rise of new kinds of donors, with the rise of new powers, the sense of a shifting balance in international politics and what that might do to the project of international development. So now is a good time to be thinking about this kind of thing. I think that the ambition of the project is to be applauded. It won't be easy to manage, but I think it's if you're going to do it, then do it big. Out of this volume might come all kinds of unexpected things that we'll learn from each other, as well as possibly new or unexpected kind of commonalities, and a sense that we might actually learn something quite profound when we got to get to the end of this process.